This is Join Us in France, episode 176. Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, its many quirks, its history, its language, and of course, destinations in France you might want to visit because it's beautiful and you'd rather travel than buy a new sofa. This episode is brought to you by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, the tour company that specializes in small group and custom tours in France. Bonjour Francophiles, I'm Annie, and on today's show I chat with Elise and Phil Roberson about the Mont Saint-Michel, specifically Phil's experience at the Mont Saint-Michel. He goes into what it's like and all the things you need to consider to prepare for your trip. The extra content for this week is called How French is Your Christmas? Maybe you want to go full French? Maybe you want to stay as far away from that as you can. This is going to be your list to see how you're doing on that. And to get the extras, go to joinusinfrance.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter. The French history brief at the end of the episode is going to be a story that has to do with a clean kill. Yeah, it's a bit gruesome, but I love gruesome stories. I'll leave it at that for now, but you'll want to stay with me. This one is really interesting. And now, here's the interview. Hello, Phil. Welcome back to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Bonjour, Elise.
Bonjour. All right, so this time for real, we are going to talk about your trip to Mont Saint-Michel.
Yes. Although I should say that Elise's history was just fascinating and told me all sorts of things I didn't know about it.
Exactly. I didn't know half of the stuff either. So it's really good that she explained all that. But it would have been too long to put in all in one episode. So, all right. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about your trip to Mont Saint-Michel, your latest one?
Yeah, my latest one. And I will say that I was there in 2012 just during the day, but I always wanted to go back. And part of that was to spend the night there because I've heard, reports of how spectacular it is at night and how much less crowded it is.
Sure.
And that was true.
Yeah.
So I was in Paris. I just arrived the day before, and I decided to go directly to Mont Saint-Michel from there. So I took the TGV to Rennes. Where I picked up a rental car. And that's probably the most direct way to get to Mont Saint-Michel. So I picked up a rental car.
Bayeux. Well, Bayeux wouldn't have a TGV, would it?
Well, if you're coming from Paris, it's the most direct route to go.
Okay.
But certainly if you combine it with the trip to Upper Normandy, then going from Bayeux would make a lot of sense.
Right.
And that's actually how I left there, is I left there and went to Bayeux, which is about an hour and a half.
Rennes and then Mont Saint-Michel and then back to Bayeux. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I went to Rennes and picked up my car, but I thought as long as I'm there and I need to eat anyway, I wanted to just go into the city and see it because I had never been there before.
Sure.
So the people at the rental car company let me leave my car right in the parking lot. It was right outside their window so they could see it. Right. And basically I just left my luggage with my laundry in there and took my camera and went into the city.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun. It was it's, I know it sounds very cliche, but it was very, charming, half-timbered buildings. And it was really pretty to just walk amongst them and down little roads. And and it was a beautiful sunny day, which most of the rest of my trip wasn't. So,
just that. Woo!
Yeah, exactly.
Lucky.
So I just spent a couple hours there and had lunch in a little square, which was very pretty. And then headed back to my car and started driving towards Mont Saint-Michel. Although I had a little side trip I wanted to make, which is an American military cemetery in St. James.
Ah.
And I think most people know about the big American cemetery in Normandy above Omaha Beach, which I've been to several times. But this one is the only other one that's in, I think that's Normandy. I don't know whether St. James is Normandy or Brittany.
Yeah, it's also close together there. We'd have to check.
Yeah. But at any rate, so I went there, and it's about half the size of the other cemetery in Omaha Beach, and much less visitors. But like any place like that, it was very sobering, just walking around. And you know, Andy, my interest in World War II history, so I just felt like that was, as long as I'm in that neck of the woods, that was a must-do.
Yeah.
So left there and drove to Mont Saint-Michel, and even though I'd been there before and I had seen it before, I have to say that as I was driving there, I just kind of came around a corner, and then I caught a view of it in the distance, and it really almost, stops your breath. It's just, you can see how for years people have been, used it maybe as a religious pilgrimage or whatever, because it's really striking just when you first see it from whatever direction.
Yeah.
But you can't drive right up to the island. You have to drive to a huge car parking lot, which is about a little over a mile and a half away from the island. And from there you can take a bus to get to the island. But
right.
I had a little bit of a communication trouble because the person manning the parking lot was basically waving me on to the expensive and even further away parking. And I was trying to explain that I had a reservation on the island, and it was my understanding that there was a place to park for free if you have a room there.
Right.
And I guess I didn't make myself known, or she was also, dealing with lots of people driving in and probably didn't have a lot of time to deal with my needs. So I basically drove to the parking lot I knew I was supposed to go to, and I had to dig out my computer and find the email and find the number of the hotel and call them to get the passcode that lets you into that parking lot. And that, so, if you are staying there, you can park for free, but you really need to have all that information with you when you drive up, because there's a gate, and you can either put in a credit card and it's going to cost you a fortune, or you can put in the right code and then you get to park for free.
Right.
And you park right, the hotel parking is right next to where the bus picks you up.
Okay. And could you walk it if you wanted to?
You could. I mean, it's a long walk. It's over a mile and a half walk.
Yeah.
And actually that's from the hotel parking lot. But yeah, you certainly could. Okay. And I'm sure some people do. Yeah. No, it's interesting because not that many years ago, you used to be able to park right outside the ramparts.
Yes, I did.
The tides allowing, of course, because at super high tides, that would be completely covered. And I will tell you that a difference between 2012 and now is, they've had this causeway going out to the island for years. And Elise talked about how it wasn't an island, and then some cataclysmic event created an island. Well, a combination of the causeway and, flood control and things like that has basically silted up the area all around the island. And it was really in danger of not being an island anymore.
Right.
So maybe 10 years ago or so, they did all sorts of changes. And one of them is they took that causeway, and for one section of it, they made it a bridge rather than a causeway, so that the tidal currents can actually flow around the island.
Yes.
And I think, the goal of that is to clear out the silt and bring it back to the way it was, even just 50 years ago or so.
It would be more spectacular.
So, Phil, does that mean that now sometimes it is surrounded by water and sometimes it's not?
Well, sometimes it's surrounded by water, but the water's not that deep.
Right.
And I know that, every so often you get super high tides, and even just 2 years ago, even the causeway was flooded over. So it definitely does get surrounded by,
high water.
Completely isolated occasionally.
Yeah.
But it's not, if you read old reports of it, the old pilgrims used to, have to go out there at low tide, and then they couldn't get there or back any other time.
Right.
So I took the bus from my car, and actually left a couple things in my car, like my tripod, because you do have to do a lot of walking on the island, and it's not, there's no reason to bring a whole bunch of stuff for one overnight stay. Yeah. But I took the bus out there, and the bus drops you off about 300 or 400 yards from the actual ramparts, the actual gate to the island, which on a beautiful day is wonderful because you're walking down this causeway with these spectacular views of it. But as you'll learn on my departure, it's not so good if the weather's bad. But that's just where they drop you. That's the deal. Nobody can park on the causeway or next to the hotel. To get there, you either walk or you take this bus.
Yeah, years ago, there was a small parking lot. You could park there, and the most daring ones would go down onto the beach. And it was always very entertaining to watch the sea come back up and their cars get flooded, which I enjoyed the one day.
You actually see?
Yeah, I actually saw that. Yes.
As long as it's not your car, I guess.
No, it wasn't mine. Mine was Safeway, much higher. It was in a much higher distance.
Yeah.
But people, they don't want to walk, so they park as close, as they can, and then the water comes in, and their car gets flooded. Nice.
But historically, that's always, I think you said before, Elise, that the name of it was Mont Saint-Michel at the peril of the sea or something like that. And you can you can see why that would be.
And
at the
actually,
peril of your car.
There's slippery. What do you call those? The sands that you can get stuck in.
Quicksand.
Quicksands?
Like quicksands. Yeah, there are spots in there that are actually quicksand. Like
really.
So, yeah, people would die. I mean, it was like they got sucked in. I mean, it was like
Excellent.
Yeah. I actually, when I first arrived, I wished I had walked out on the beach or in the sand right away because it was the lowest the tide was. And later that day, there was just enough water that I only had one pair of shoes, and I just didn't want to risk getting them soaked. And it looked like I would have. So, but there were a lot of people when I arrived that were walking around, outside of the ramparts and walking on the sands, and it really is beautiful out there.
It is definitely the type of place where you have to time things. With the tides.
Yes. And I will say that I didn't time things well. I basically bought a ticket to France when I saw a cheap one come up, and in the back of my mind is I wanted to go to Mont Saint-Michel. But the reality of it was when I was there was the least variation of tides. So I didn't really get the dramatic, high tide or low tide or anything like that. That was just the timing. And, if it's going to be your one and only trip there and you have a little bit of flexibility, timing it around, dramatic tides may be even more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
this was September. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but this was September 2017 when you did this trip. So it's very recent.
Yep. Just a couple months ago. Yeah. So I had a reservation, and my reservation was at Le Mouton Blanc, I think is the name of the hotel.
Mouton Blanc,
And when you get to the island, you go through this gate, and there's basically one main road. I say road, but you can't fit a car on it at all, that winds up. It kind of circles around the island and eventually leads you up to the Abbey.
Yes.
But it's very narrow. There's a lot of shops on it. There's a lot of restaurants. And there are usually, if it's during the day, tons of tourists.
Yeah.
So you have to work your way up this road. And I was, my hotel was maybe a third of the way up. So I get to the hotel with my luggage. And there's a sign at the desk saying to check in, go back down to the bottom of the road to this other hotel named La Mer Pollard. And you can check in there. So that was a little inconvenient.
Was there a person there that you could slap? That's what I would have done.
There was. I know, and it was a different hotel. But this name Pollard is going to come up a lot because
it's Pollard thing over there.
I think they own like most of the restaurants or most of the hotels and a lot of the restaurants on the island. It's a big kind of conglomerate. They didn't own mine, but obviously they were managing check-in that day.
Yeah,
so I go back.
They're going too soon.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you go back to the bottom of the road, and then I had to go up a couple flights of stairs to get to the check-in place. So yeah, it was certainly a little inconvenient, but I checked in, got the key to my room, went back up the road, and dropped my bag up there. And at this point, it was mid to late afternoon, so the crowds weren't as bad as they could be. But there were still a lot of people on the island. Yeah. And I will say something, let me back up a little bit to the fact that I left some things in my car. You definitely need to pack light here because it's a narrow road. It's crowded. It's got cobblestones. And on my way in, I remember seeing this couple, and they were a young couple, but they were leaving. And they had that luggage that it's kind of like has four little wheels on it. You see in the airports all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And they roll very smooth through airport, aisles and things like that. They're terrible on cobblestones. And this couple was struggling so hard with these two big pieces of luggage. And like I say, they were pretty young. They looked fit, but I would say carry it on your back if you can and pack light. Most people won't be there for more than a day or a night. So you don't really need much.
There aren't that many hotels on the island, right?
No. No, and you need to plan ahead if you're going to spend the night because they book out way in advance.
Yeah, because I was looking at hotels for one of the additions to our May tour in Paris is a 4-day in Normandy over the celebrations of June 6th.
Yes.
And it looked to me like for the night of June 4th, which is when we'd be at Mont Saint-Michel, most of the rooms are already booked on the mount itself.
I'm sure, yeah. No, there are some hotels out beyond the causeway, and they're actually along the bus route, so you can stay at those and take the bus for free to and from.
Yeah.
And you can even go there, take a bus in the evening if you want to see it, at night.
Because the bus, I think somebody else on the show told us that the bus runs to like midnight or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, that'll cover the time most people will want to be there. But it was also very special to be actually on the island because I ended up going, in and out of my room and, to dinner and to see sights. And it was very different at different times of the night.
Yeah.
And so if you want to do that, plan ahead for sure. Because I think there's only like a few dozen rooms on the island itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I checked in my room, got to my room and dropped my bags. And I will say that if you're going to go right to the cathedral, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but if you're going to go right to the cathedral, there's that main road. However, when you come just inside the gates, you have an option to take a set of stairs to the ramparts, and you can walk those around the outside of the island, and you miss a lot of the crowds. You miss all the restaurants and everything, but you can always catch those on the way down.
Yes.
So
that would be smart if it's a crowded time of day.
Yes. So I ended up walking out to those ramparts just to make my way up to the Abbey, and my timing wasn't all that good. I thought they closed at 6:00, but apparently in September they close at 5:00.
Oh,
and
really?
Which
really
means they
wouldn't have
probably
given
close at 5 most of the year. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe in July and August they stay open an hour later, but
yeah. So I decided it wasn't worth it to go for just a very short rush time, and I'd see some other things and then go in the morning, which worked out really well. Mm-hmm. So I walked back down from the Abbey, and there's another place, I think they call it a Saint-Michel chapel. It's not part of the Abbey itself. It's just a little chapel along that road.
Yeah.
And I stopped in there. I see on the maps it says St. Pierre Church or something, but I thought for sure the sign said Saint-Michel Chapel.
Huh.
And it's this wonderful, just little chapel. We walked into that and then walked out a door on the other side and came out to a part of the island I wasn't even familiar with. There's a little cemetery on there, apparently. It's very small and it's very quiet. There was nobody around there. But it was just pretty, and it was kind of nice for a major tourist attraction that's usually crowded to be somewhere where there weren't that many people.
Yeah, that's always how it works. If you go off just a tiny bit sometimes, you find yourself with a lot fewer people.
Yeah, and I basically had to go through the chapel and out a door on the other side. But then once I was there was all these other little sidewalks and pathways, some of which I think the few locals that live there use. And yeah, you really can explore and see things that are different. I think, most people will go there in the middle of the day and they'll walk up that main road, and it's great, but there are other things if you look for them on the island.
Yeah.
So at this point, it was getting later in the day, and I went back and had dinner at a restaurant also owned by the Pollard conglomerate, whatever. It was right next to my hotel. I mean, they seem to own everything there. And,
no, it is a conglomerate. It's a racket.
Yeah, I did hear there's one hotel that's family owned, the Hotel de Gosselin.
Okay.
And but it's family owned, but they're closed Thursday nights. You simply can't get a room Thursday night, and that was the night I was there.
Okay, that's helpful.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think they have a restaurant which is also closed too.
Why do you close a hotel one night a week?
Yeah, and maybe because it is family owned and they want a day off.
That they have too many people anyway.
Yeah. And eventually the Pollards will buy them anyway, so.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll be 7 days a week.
By the way, talking about the Poulard, the original Madame Poulard was the servant, the housekeeper of one of the two men who did the restoration in the 1800s.
Oh, really?
Oh.
That's how she got famous.
She was a cook.
The cook.
She was a cook.
Afterwards,
She must have done something
exactly
right.
How it developed into a big deal and making lots of money and all of that. But that was part of what I was reading yesterday. It's like Madame Poulard, Mademoiselle Poulard, was actually the cook of one of the two men who were undertaking the restoration. Very interesting.
Well, I guess it's better then that sort of family is involved in the business rather than somebody who just, a remote investor that sees this as a good place to capitalize on. I mean, it's definitely a touristy place, and it's there's no business there that's not centered around tourism, whether it's rooms or restaurants or little gift shops and things like that. But I wouldn't put anybody off from going there because of that. Typically, for myself, if a place is 99% tourism, I just soon go somewhere else. But this place is different. It's worth it despite the hordes of tourists that are there.
Yeah, I agree. There are places that got to be this touristy, and it's not well deserved. But that one, I think it is. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. So I had dinner at this restaurant, and originally there was some outdoor seating, but almost as soon as I sat down, a few raindrops started coming down, and I didn't want to risk it. So they had it was still outdoor, but covered with a tent seating, and you could still see the ocean, not quite as nice a view, but I could still see it, and ate there, and it was fine. It was, I think you're not going to find fine dining on the island, but it was a good restaurant and with a nice view and just a real picturesque place to sit and eat.
Yeah, Mont Saint-Michel is famous for the omelets.
Yes.
Which I've only been there once, and I had an omelet, and I had to send it back because it was not cooked.
Is that right?
Oh, it was awful.
There are places on the main road where they make quite a show of making the omelets, and I think you pay as much for the show as for the food.
Yeah, so there's a lot of air. They beat in a lot of air,
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have two main foods. You have les moules normandes, the mussels, and
with cream,
with lots of cream. It's delicious. It's mostly cream. I mean, and
it's Normandy. It's Normandy. It has to have cream.
And then you have the omelets, but and the cookies, les gâteaux de la mère Poulard. So they're little they're like
butter cookies.
Yeah, shortbread. Yeah, it's a type of shortbread.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think I ate any of those things, but I don't remember exactly what I ate at the restaurant. I remember more of the ambiance than the meal. But it was, it was a good meal.
But this is definitely not a place where you go for the gastronomy. I'm sure there are places in Normandy that have outstanding gastronomy, but they're not on the Mont Saint-Michel. So
no, and I think the reality is most people, if they go there at all, will go once in their lifetime. So you're not catering to repeat business. As long as your TripAdvisor reviews are not terrible, people will eat there because you're the only place to eat.
Exactly.
And, the few people that live on the island are probably working in the restaurants and probably don't eat there.
Yes.
But I don't mean to sound that it was terrible or anything. It's just, you like to say, you don't go there for the fine dining.
Right.
So an advantage of going there, of Normandy being so far west is that even though this was late September, when I got out at dinner, it was still very light out. And I think the sun didn't set till almost 8:30. Which, where I live, that's where it sets in the middle of summer. I was able to go back here.
Yeah, in France, whether you're in the south of France or the north of France, anywhere, in September, the sun would not set before probably 8:39 would be the earliest it would set.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so that was nice, and it gave me an opportunity to go back out on the causeway to eyeball the island and try to take some pictures. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, this trip I didn't have the best weather on this trip, and it was intermittent rain most of the time and downpours at other times. So when I went out onto the causeway to take pictures, it wasn't the best light, but I did stay around long enough for it to start getting dark, and you could actually see some lights in the abbey in the windows at the top of the abbey, and it was just very
nice.
Very contemplative,
Yeah. And so did you bring a rain jacket for your camera?
I have a backpack that the camera goes into, and it has a rain cover for it if I need to get it out. But I didn't bring anything that I could have my camera out in the rain.
Oh, I have
pictures.
a rain jacket for the camera. I have the backpack with the rain thing and the rain jacket for the camera.
I think I actually have one. I just didn't. I'm actually looking at it sitting on my desk right next to me. I forgot to bring it, but I'd still be, just worried. It's still 100% humidity and expensive camera and lens and things like that.
Yeah. You definitely want the little silicone packets in your backpack, in your camera bag, because no, not silicone, silica, I think it is.
Silica.
Yeah.
But so I did get some pictures out there, and that was nice. And it was just at this point, the island was quieting down. Most of the tourists had left. Certainly all the buses had left. And walking back up that road, there was, there were just very few people on it. Some shopkeepers, tidying up things and eventually closing up their shop. And so I just walked up the road and then again found some, I don't know if you call them ramparts, but just other little passageways and aisles and sidewalks, behind the scenes on the island. And it was just great to walk around there at that hour of night with, so different from the middle of the day with a million tourists. You'd occasionally see a couple people walking around. You'd see a lot of cats that maybe hide out during the day. I don't know if they're feral or they just belong to people and they let them out at night. But it was very nice. It was just a real peaceful night, which is what I had heard and what I experienced.
Very good.
So finally went back to my room to get a night's sleep after a long trip from Paris.
Yeah. So was this hotel any good?
It was okay. It was okay. I think like the restaurants, they don't have to be really good. And you don't really go there to stay in your room, although some of the rooms have ocean views. Mine, if I stuck my head out the window, I could look to the right and see the ocean. And everything's old there. Like, I don't know how old the actual building that this hotel is in, but this window was this massive frame of oak. And of course it's on the ocean, so I'm sure it gets beat up by the weather. And I thought that was just very cool. The actual, just the construction, the half timbered things. But the hotel was fine, and it was right next to this Pollard restaurant that I ate breakfast and dinner at. You could actually walk between the two on the second floor. There was a passageway between them.
Yeah. So do you think it's worth the extra hassle of staying on the Mont?
I think if you plan ahead, because it wasn't outrageously priced or anything, I think it's worth it. I mean, actually, I think it would be a little bit more of a hassle to stay off, because I was able to, come and go as I wanted at all hours, whether, after dinner, first thing in the morning, without having to get on that bus and go down the causeway.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you're off the island, there may be more dining options. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's certainly worth, if you're going to spend the night in that area and not just be a day tripper. I think it's certainly worth spending the night on there.
Yeah. It's worth, if you can reserve ahead of time.
Yeah, it's just takes planning ahead. And I didn't plan as far out as I had wished. But I was still able to get a room, probably because it was September rather than, June or July.
Exactly. June, July, August is probably super busy. Anywhere around the D-Day celebrations is going to be super busy.
Yes. And just everybody's regular vacation time too.
Yeah, weekends are going to be bad.
Yep. And I was there on a Thursday night.
Do you have any idea how many steps you had to do to get to the hotel?
Well, the hotel itself, if you don't count me having to go to a different hotel to check in,
well, that counts.
Was basically right off the road. And I had to take like 3 steps down and then a flight of stairs up to my room. But of course I had to go back down the hill and go up like 1.5 or 2 flights of stairs to get to this other hotel. I will say that the island itself, I really wouldn't recommend it to anyone with mobility issues,
right?
Because it's steep, it's cobblestone. To get anywhere, you have to walk.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was up very early in the morning and I saw the restaurants getting ready, and they have these little carts. They're bigger than a golf cart, but almost like a forklift, just to move things up and down that road. And of course, they don't do it during the day when all the tourists are there, but that's how they get all their supplies and food and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be a tough place for somebody with mobility issues because the road's packed. It's cobblestone. If you do the ramparts, there's stairs. There's still stairs even at the top of the road to get up to the to the Abbey.
Yeah.
And then the Abbey itself, there are many stairs going all the way through it to get to the different levels.
Yeah, I think for people with mobility issues, it would still be worth going, but you could see it from the road.
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
can be pretty. I mean, there's probably accessible paths to where you can get a little closer.
Yeah.
But getting on, it's not made for wheelchairs or
No.
well, and it depends. I mean, it depends on the disability
Or bad knees.
Yeah, bad
Yeah.
knees or stuff like that would be difficult.
And I did see some people that were struggling. That it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were looking forward to this for a long time, but the look on their face was, this is hard work. And, older people mostly. And I felt a little bad for them. I hope they enjoyed it regardless, but, I could just see the pain on the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next morning was my time to see the Abbey, and I got up relatively early. I wanted to go to the causeway for sunrise pictures, but of course it was raining again. So I waited a while and did a little packing, and then went back out there after the rain had stopped to get pictures. And even though it was overcast over the island, I could see in the east that the clouds were breaking, and I knew that's the way the weather was coming from.
Yeah.
And I just knew if I waited a while, it looked like there'd get sun on the island. And it was just myself and one other guy was out there. It was early enough, and he had his tripod and he was set up ready to take pictures as well. And again, very different mood than the middle of the day. There was nobody out on the causeway. I saw maybe one couple that was approaching the island that were smart enough to get there early.
Yeah.
But so I waited until the sun finally broke and got some nice pictures. It wasn't the best photo op I've ever had, but it was really nice. And
but
I
it
wanted
was good,
to walk away from that.
Yeah, and if you're kind enough to send me some of those pictures, I'll use them for the episode posts.
Yes, I will. I'll definitely send pictures. There was a couple that was approaching and they were taking pictures, and I offered to take their picture with their camera, and they offered to take mine. Unfortunately, I don't think they're great photographers, but there is part of me in the picture, and there is part of the island in the picture. So, so early enough that I went back to the island and went to the restaurant next to my hotel for breakfast. And at this point, after breakfast, bus loads started to arrive, and rain was it had started raining again, and it was picking up. And I saw people starting to come up the street with, it was definitely like the approach of the tourists and the rain. So I packed up, walked up to the cathedral. I think they opened at 9:30 in the morning, and I got there a little earlier than that, so I'd be in the first group.
Yeah.
And there were already lines there, maybe 10, 15 minutes out, but they were fairly small. And once they opened the door, I was able to get right in.
Yeah. Do they meter how many people go in?
I think they do. And actually, when I was standing outside, there were two lines, one for individuals and one for tour groups. And I think there's some maybe organized bus tours where you take the bus and there's a tour guide and they bring you up to the Abbey. But we went in separate entrances. I guess the tour groups are probably prepaid and everything.
Right. So you have to pay to go into the Abbey.
You do have to pay to go into the Abbey, I believe. Is that right?
I don't remember. It's been years.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. And there's also an optional audio guide that I definitely recommend, because there's no signage inside the Abbey. And the audio guide will tell you a lot about the architecture and the building techniques and what the different areas were used for.
Yeah, so that would be really interesting.
That was well worth it. And then when you first go inside the Abbey, right where you get your ticket, they have these 4 little models of the island, scale models from different time periods. And I think the earliest one is maybe 10th, 11th century or something, like what was there for a church or for, what were there for buildings, which was basically just the church. And then one a couple centuries later, and now. And you can actually find those pictures on Wikipedia, pictures of these models. And it just gives you an idea of how this was, built up over 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very neat. I mean, the architecture of the whole place is amazing. So I went inside, went into the big, I guess it's the cathedral, or I don't know what you call the main, my religious nomenclature isn't all that good, but basically the place where services are held.
Yeah.
And then you go outside of that, and there's this terrace outside that was just beautiful with these stunning, at this point you're on the top of the mount, and just stunning views of the bay. And it was early enough in the morning that you could see the sun come. When the sun would peek out from the clouds, it would glance off the water. And then back into the Abbey. And the Abbey's, I think, as Elise had mentioned, it's like they built on and on to it. So there's all sorts of additions and many rooms. It's easy to get turned around in there. Some were very small rooms. Some were for gigantic rooms. And some of the large rooms had, I don't know if they're used for meetings or whatever, but they had, huge fireplaces on either end so that you could use it in bad weather. But it made me think, where do you get the firewood? And I'm sure you'd quickly wipe out any trees that are on the island. And then you have to bring it in from, cart it all in. So that must have been quite an effort just to get the place, heated and habitable through the winter.
Yeah. The small rooms, did you see some of the, like, really small rooms?
I do remember seeing some fairly small rooms.
Those were the cells for the individual monks.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, Elise, you mentioned how they built, one church on top of another. And there was a place where you're underneath the church and there are these gigantic stone columns that are kind of holding everything up. And they're huge. They're probably, 8-10 feet in diameter, and they're only 8-10 feet apart. I guess they needed that many of them.
Yeah.
And I think the audio guide was kind of explaining that was some of the earlier architecture.
Yeah.
And even the arch styles were different from then to, arches they built later on.
And talking about the wood, I don't know where they got the wood, except that one of the things that I was reading was that they had to bring in the stone. The rock is granite, but they brought in other stone from nearby to build the churches, and then they had to bring in limestone to do all the carved columns and everything. And they had to drag all of that up to the top. Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort. And there was one place where they had a huge wooden wheel, and it was basically a crane, and it was a big enough wheel that men would walk inside it and walk on it, sort of like a gerbil cage.
I remember that.
And there's a rope around it, so they would walk and haul up supplies, and that would be a way, I guess, they got regular supplies up into the abbey. And I don't know if this is a reproduction of it. It probably is, but you can see the opening in the stonework where the rope goes down, and there's this, a lot of stonework that just supports that. But I guess that whatever they had to get in, that's where a lot of it came in.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so the tour, it's not really a tour, but, just walking around listening to the audio guide. It's very interesting. Lots of different rooms. The cloisters, which I had remembered from my previous trip, were undergoing a renovation. So you could walk around them, but the actual green area in the middle was completely being redone. And there were masons working on the stonework and the carvings and things like that. So it's good to see that they were bringing it back. But I just, happened to go at a time when the cloisters themselves were just a construction site.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you work your way, if you just follow the path through the abbey, you work your way out to the other side. I guess it's the north side of the island. And you start seeing, you start looking up at the church again, and you can work your way down the path to the ramparts and eventually come back into, what I guess is best described as the town. And as you're doing this too, you can actually see places where the stonework, and this thing is so many stories high, but as you mentioned, it's built on granite. So you come up to some places where there's the original granite, and there's the first stones that start supporting this whole structure, and big buttresses that come out to support it. Architecturally, it's just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, I'm heading back into town, and now the crowds are really starting to come, and I'm going. They're going upstream. I'm going downstream, and it's
How long
raining.
did you spend in the abbey?
Maybe an hour.
Okay.
I'm guessing hour and a half, maybe an hour and a half, no more than that.
Okay.
So when I came out, it was late morning, and the buses had been dropping off from the tour groups, and people were working their way up, and at this point the rain started again. So now you have all these people working their way up this road. It's pouring rain. There's people and umbrellas, and you can see why you want to try to avoid going there in the middle of the day or on a rainy day if you have the option.
Yeah.
So I made my way back to my room, grabbed my bags, and went out to the causeway to catch the bus back. At this point, the rain is really heavy, and it's kind of blowing sideways. So there's people coming off these buses. And again, the buses drop you off 300 to 400 yards from the entrance.
Yeah.
And you're completely exposed on the causeway, and the wind is whipping, and people's umbrellas were getting inverted. And it was a good time to be leaving, actually.
Well, you made a mistake. You said you only brought one pair of shoes.
Yeah, I usually I usually bring one pair of shoes and then my running shoes because I usually run even if I'm on vacation. And this time I just decided that it was just going to be a vacation, no running. And yeah, that was kind of a mistake.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. You need.
Yeah.
I think you need 3 because if you get really, really a good soaking,
Yeah.
the next morning for sure they won't be dry. Maybe the day after that, but maybe not. So I think you need at least 2 pairs of walking shoes and possibly a third if you can pack it in.
Yeah, it's funny because the first day I was there in Paris, it poured rain also, and my feet did get soaked, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do.
And there's nothing worse than putting back shoes on
wet shoes
that
in
are
the morning.
wet.
I know, but I was lucky that there was some sort of a radiator in the bathroom with an adjustable thermostat. So before I went to sleep, I just propped my shoes up on there and turned it up, and
them.
I was fine.
Because you could have melted them.
Well, yeah. Then I wouldn't have to worry about putting on wet shoes in the morning, I guess.
Yeah. No, this is a problem. I've had to do that in my life. I never want to do that again. So more than one pair of shoes.
Yeah, and particularly in Normandy, because I think on all my previous trips, I'd been very lucky with the weather, but I mean, it rains there a lot. That's why it's so green.
Yeah, that's why the cows are so fat.
Yeah. So I made it off the island, took the bus back to my car.
Yeah.
And started my end point for that day was going to be Bayeux. So I started driving along the, I guess it's just to the east of the island, but along, what's the road? It's the D275 or the D75. It's a D road.
Yeah.
And from there, you see lots of views of Mont Saint-Michel.
Yes.
And views across this pasture land where they graze, cattle and sheep. And even though it was raining, it was still very picturesque, and you can see how, anybody approaching it would be drawn to keep coming further.
Yeah.
And to me, it's the best way to approach or leave the island if you have an option. And certainly, if you're coming from Bayeux or going to Bayeux, you could stay on the N road, which is the way a GPS would probably bring you. But if you get off a little earlier and take those D roads, you just get these spectacular views of the island. And I'll send you some of the pics I took of that.
Yeah, and the D roads are usually not very crowded, and so you can usually pull over somewhere and take some photos too.
Exactly, and I was able to pull over in my car, so that my car served as the rain jacket for my camera at that point.
Very good.
Which was nice.
Good plan.
So I finally, it faded out of view, my rearview mirror, and I ended up going to Avranches. I don't know how to pronounce it. Avranches. Yeah, and I think Elise had mentioned this earlier, that it was that was kind of the center of power when Mont Saint-Michel was being built. Mm-hmm. And it was a great little town. I wanted to stop there and get lunch, and so I parked some parking spot in town, went to the tourist information room and got some information about restaurants and things to see in town. Mm-hmm. Had a lovely lunch at this little place right in downtown. It was called Tartines and Découverte.
Yeah, Tartines et Découverte.
Tartines et Découverte. And we kind of stumbled across it, and it was just really good food, really good atmosphere. And one thing that you don't see in the U.S. that often that I kind of like being a dog owner is people can take their dogs into a lot of restaurants. So there was a family next to me, and their dog was sitting very patiently by their table, and I have to live vicariously through other people's dogs when I'm on vacation. So after there, I left and went up to a little park that had a statue in it, and supposedly there are views from this park of Mont Saint-Michel, but I think the weather just didn't permit it. But it was, I think when I looked at it on a map, they called it Square Thomas Becket. And I think it was as best as my limited French could tell from the monument there, that it was to some French soldiers who died maybe during the French Revolution, the 1790s or something like that.
Could be.
Yeah. And then kept going up the hill because Avranches is kind of on a hill overlooking the bay. And there were the ruins of some sort of a castle or something that must have dated to back when they were building Mont Saint-Michel. And there's nothing you could go inside. It was just kind of the ramparts and the stonework. But climbing up there, you get a great view of the town, a great view of the surrounding area. And right next to that, which I didn't go to, and now after hearing Elise talk about the history of Mont Saint-Michel, I wish I had, is the scriptorial, which, as best I can tell, is some sort of museum where all of the original documents and manuscripts from Mont Saint-Michel are stored.
Oh, wow.
So all those translations she mentioned that that they did on the island, that's where they live now, is in this museum.
How nice.
Yeah. So there's a lot of history in Avranches that ties to Mont Saint-Michel, and it's a good stopping off point either to or from Bayeux, between Bayeux and Mont Saint-Michel.
And is it a good place to stay overnight?
It probably would be. I didn't look at it for that purpose, but it's a real town. I mean, sure, there are some tourist sites, but, it was mostly, locals that I saw there. And I think maybe down the hill from the town, there's a kind of a port area. I would think there would be, because there's a river that kind of flows right into the bay right there. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get down there. But yeah, I think Avranches would be a great place to stay. Mm-hmm. I think, if you can stay in Mont Saint-Michel or stay in Bayeux, I'd personally recommend them more, but I think Avranches is probably much less touristy if you want to.
Can I just ask you a question, Phil? I'm assuming that it was not a problem in Mont Saint-Michel. In general, not speaking French, was it at all a problem?
No. I have to speak very limited French, and I work on it all the time. So every so often I'd walk into a hotel and, I ask for, tell them who I am and that I have a reservation in French. And I guess my gauge of how my French is doing is if they would reply to me in French. Like, how long will they keep this French up until they know it's much easier to just go to English? But I even had some people ask me, is it okay to speak French? And it really isn't beyond those first few sentences. But that's not a problem. And certainly at any place where you any tourist place like Mont Saint-Michel or Bayeux or anything like that, it's never a problem.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, I think sometimes French people they know that their English is better than my French, but they're still some of them are still a little insecure about their English. Just like people from America would be insecure about their French unless you're fluent, which is kind of the minority.
Yeah. Yeah, and because you know all the niceties in French and you know how to do basic French, then they're going to be super nice to you anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just try, then they'll go, okay, well, he tried, so now let's go to English where this will all be much easier.
Yeah.
But, you just can't go with the assumption that, I'm going to speak English and they're going to speak English back to me. You have to, at the very least, as everyone says, say bonjour. And then if you can try to struggle through a question or two, they'll know you tried, so they'll try it themselves.
And, in Paris, people, just because of the way I look, and I look more American than French, people will speak English to me. And and when they hear me speak, when I first approach them, they speak English to me. And if I respond in French, they can hear I'm French, and then they switch to French.
Yes.
But
I saw that a lot of places where I would go, particularly in Paris. I mean, you're not going to look like a French person or a Parisian if you come from the U.S. and they see you walking through the door and they greet you in English sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. Because that's just how it works in touristy places. They just get used to the look, and I buy all my clothes in the U.S., so it's not surprising that they would think I'm French and not French. So they kind of get surprised when they hear my French, like, oh, well, you're.
That's that old saying. What do you call somebody who speaks two languages?
What?
Bilingual.
Yes.
And what do you call somebody who speaks three languages?
Trilingual.
And what do you call somebody who speaks one language?
American. I had heard that one. Yes, I had heard that one. Good one.
That was it. I finished up in Avranches and headed off to Bayeux and had several more days in France. But that was my second trip to Mont Saint-Michel, and it was well worth it and well worth staying on the island. And despite the weather, I had a great time and got some good pictures. And I don't know if I'll ever make it back, but I'm glad I at least made it back for this trip.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And before we say goodbye, I want to heartily recommend people listen to your episode on your World War II trip.
Yes.
That was episode 116. It's extremely informative. And if you are going to Normandy to visit D-Day or World War II sites, you have to listen to Phil tell you about it, because he's extremely knowledgeable and very easy to listen to.
Well, thank you. It's definitely one of my passions, and
Yeah.
I've made it back there a couple times since that time I did the podcast with you, and I'm sure I'll be back there again.
Yeah. You're excellent to talk about that because you know so much and you obviously enjoy the area very, very much. So
yeah, and enjoy. I see you have the trip coming up to Normandy next June, so I'm looking forward to hearing your reports of that and how that went.
Yeah, that would be
great.
very fun. I've never been there at that time of year.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't been back to Normandy probably since 2007 or 2008. It's been a long time for me. So
I was there 3 years ago.
yeah. Well, but you go to Brittany regularly.
No, but I've been but Normandy, Bayeux, Avranches, all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I want to thank you both for this opportunity, and thank you, Elise, especially because although I'd spoken with Annie before, I'd never spoken with you, and the historical context of the Mont Saint-Michel is just wonderful, and I almost wish I'd spoken with you before I'd gone there.
Oh, I'm sure that it's good afterwards because now you associate it with the things you've actually seen. I think that's even better.
Yeah,
but thank you.
True.
All right, thank you very much, Phil. And who knows? I might have you back on soon to talk about Paris because you're not as familiar with Paris. So your point of view on that would be very interesting as well.
Yes, would love to do it anytime.
Okay.
All right.
Merci. Au revoir.
Merci.
Au revoir. Merci.
Thank you for signing up to support Join Us in France on Patreon this week, Jenna Green. Many thanks to all the patrons who support the show month after month. I want you to know how much I appreciate your continued support. When you become a patron, you get access to everything that I've published on Patreon before. And to join the list of patrons, visit patreon.com and search for Join Us in France. Patreon is Patreon. Don't forget the Amazon affiliate program for Join Us. Before you shop on Amazon, click on the Amazon logo on the site or on the Amazon link on your show notes and shop as you normally would. You do not pay a penny more and the show gets a commission for sending you to Amazon. It's not very much, but it helps pay for bandwidth and that's wonderful. The question of the week was, what changes do you think I can make to the podcast to make it even better in 2018? And here's what you had to say. I should have pinned this question to the top of the group so that more people saw it, but I'll do that now and I will let it run for another week. So please keep answering the question because I am listening to what you think. 48 of you said more French history, and you will definitely get that because I love the stuff and I can't get enough of it. It's funny, isn't it, how when I was younger, I didn't really like history and I didn't pay any attention to it. And then when I started doing this show, I felt so behind compared to Elise and I started reading. And now I love the stuff. It really grows on you, doesn't it? It's really interesting. 30 of you said you want more episodes with Elise, and I will do my best to make that happen, but she is the master of her schedule. So those of you who want that, please reach out to her and let her know. You can tag her on Facebook and let her know. 27 of you said you want more targeted episodes, and I think that's sorely needed as well. It's not that I want to go away from the conversational show that I've been producing for almost 4 years now, because I love doing it. But I want to add a few more kind of scripted or written out episodes to the lineup. I'll keep doing the trip reports, I'll keep doing the interviews with Elise, but I need to make room for more targeted episodes. Then 9 of you want more trip reports, and I'm not sure if I can pull that off. I mean, I need to add more targeted shows to the lineup, so obviously it's going to eat up a few trip reports throughout the year, but I'll keep doing them. It's just, I'm not going to increase the number of trip reports. There's no way I can do that. And if you want to do a trip report with me, please email me because my list of pre-recorded episodes is getting short, so I need a few more. Then 5 of you want more hotel and restaurant reviews. Well, that would be a really good use for the voicemail number, wouldn't it? Why don't you call in and leave a voice review of a great restaurant or a great hotel you visited? You could even make it a bad review if you want, if you had a bad experience. Because I live in France, I don't sleep in hotels all that much, and I don't go out to eat all the time either. So you're the visitors, you do the reviews. Call them in 1-801-806-1015 and leave a voicemail. You won't be interrupting anything because it doesn't ring at my house. I just get an email message saying, there's a voicemail. Then 4 of you said you want shorter episode. I want to work towards that as well. I'm not sure how I will pull it off, but I'm thinking about it and working on it. And finally, 2 of you said you'd like better sound quality. That's not something I can do very much about because to get really good sound quality, I'd have to push out a WAV file, which is massive. So I need to do MP3. I've learned how to remove all these little annoying things in audio, the clicks and the hums and the humming in the background and all that for the most part. But when you do trip reports and I'm on Skype with somebody, I don't have much control over the sound of Skype. It's not too bad usually, but sometimes it gets really. And the only way to get away from that would be to invest in professional tools. Like there's this thing called the Hindenburg Reporter. That's what reporters use. Well, it costs like $300 a month or something. I'm not paying for that. If you want to pay for that, send me a donation. I will definitely use it. Okay. All right, so the other fun update is that the show, Join Us in France, is now on Spotify. Spotify is this massive music streaming service that I've been using for years. And I use it every day pretty much to listen to music. And lots and lots of, it's got so many subscribers. It's amazing. And they were very picky about which podcasts they let in. And now they've opened up a little bit more. At first, 6 months ago, they would only let in like the super famous people. And now Join Us in France is on there. So it must be that I'm super famous. Just kidding. Anyway, so it's very exciting. If you have friends who don't have any clue how to use a podcast app, but they do listen to music on Spotify, you can open the mobile app and search for Join Us in France, and you'll find it. The other exciting thing is that very soon, not yet, it's probably going to be a few months, Join Us in France is going to get its own voice command on the Amazon Echo. Or there's another device. I have never used one of these. I hear about them, but I've never used one of these. Sorry. And I know I'm not supposed to say the A word because then it'll trigger it if you have one. Something really funny happened, and I'm going to say hi to Kelsey and Marie. Okay, so Kelsey is this person who was on the last tour in Paris with me, and her mother, Marie, was on, and she was so sweet. Marie was very, very wonderful person, and she said, she told me at one point, I have never listened to your tapes. And I thought that was so cute because we haven't listened to tapes in so long. She doesn't listen to podcasts, so Kelsey had played some for her. But what Marie does all the time is she uses her Amazon device to do all sorts of things. She was talking about it. She was saying how much she loves it and whatever. And I think it's going to be a great way for people who are not super tech savvy to get access to listening to podcasts. And because Join Us in France is going to get its own voice command, you'll be able to say something like, I'm not sure how it's going to work specifically because, like I said, I never used it. But it's going to be something like, play Join Us in France or something like that. So as soon as it's available, I will let you know. And now the last exciting development for the show, Join Us in France now has shirts and tote bags and coffee mugs and iPhone cases and other things. Pillowcases. Yeah, pillowcases. Like decorative pillows. And more things. I looked around at all these companies that do print on demand, and the one I selected is called TeePublic because they don't just do t-shirts, they also do other things, and they are pretty cute. I like them. I've ordered a couple. I know several of you anyway, not lots, but several of you have ordered some too, so I haven't received mine yet, so I can't tell you what it's like for real, but you might have received yours already because if you live in the US, it's closer. So I'd love to hear what you like about it or don't like about it. That would be a really good use for the voicemail number, wouldn't it? So if you got a shirt, call 1-801-806-1015 and let us know what it's like. And I'll put a link in the show notes to get to TeePublic and also in each episode. And if you want to find it easily, you go to joinusinfrance.com/support. The best way to connect with me is email me, Annie@joinusinfrance.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 1-801-806-1015. This is the French tip of the week. The French tip of the week today is going to be really, really short and sweet. C'est bientôt Noël. C'est bientôt Noël. It's Christmas soon. C'est bientôt Noël. What can I tell you? I'm a Christmas enthusiast. I can't help myself. This is the French History Brief. On December 1st, 1789, a famous doctor took the stand at the French Assembly to argue for a new law. The idea was that executions should be performed in the same way, no matter the rank of the accused and the gravity of the act. You see, up until then, people who were condemned to death in France did not all die in the same way. Noble people were decapitated with a sword. Regular people were hung or beaten to death, which has the lovely name in French of roué vif or rompu vif. Just the word makes me shudder. And the worst fate was reserved for non-nobles who attempted against the king's life. For them, it was dismemberment. Where they tie a person's limb to ropes and pull the limbs off. It's absolutely gruesome. I don't even want to think about how they implemented that. The big advance this doctor was proposing was that every condemned person would be killed in the same way. Decapitated with the use of a machine, and it wouldn't be a human killing another human directly. The machine had to do the killing. Somebody had to push the button, obviously, but the fact that the machine was doing the deed was a big advance. This doctor's name, as you might have guessed, was Dr. Guillotin. But what you probably don't know is that Dr. Guillotin did not invent the machine himself. It's not even clear that he had much to do with the design of the machine at all. What Guillotin did is that he pushed the humanist idea of killing via a machine and for the same death for every condemned person. And you've got to admit, chopping a head off quickly is a lot better than what they were doing before. The inventor of the guillotine, the machine proper, was another doctor, actually a military surgeon, called Antoine Louis. And the original name for the guillotine in French was La Louisette or Louison, which translates into Louis' invention. I'm not sure why that name didn't stick, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's because there were so many people named Louis in France back then. Not so many now. The word association wasn't comfortable, and so the name guillotine, taken from the last name Guillotin, didn't have any connotations like that. The law on execution of prisoners was passed on June 3rd, 1791, and the guillotine worked overtime for too long. The guillotine was used for the last time in France, get this, in September 1977. Yeah, that's not so long ago. I was alive then. But the death penalty was abolished completely in France in 1981, and the last guillotine was put in storage at a prison in Fresnes, just a little south of Paris. Next week's show is going to be on the lovely, very small village of Saint-Bertrand-de-Comminges in the southwest, in mine and Elise's neck of the wood, and we talk about it together next week. Thank you for listening. If you heard something in today's episode that someone you know would enjoy, find this episode on Join Us in France on Facebook, the page, the Join Us in France page, not the group, and tag them. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2017 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.